What happens when a human mechanic accidentally boards the most feared warship in the galaxy, only to discover that its all-female dragon crew has been waiting 3 centuries for someone exactly like him? Marcus Chen thought he was catching a ride to the Outer Rim colonies. Instead, he found himself trapped aboard the Crimson Talon, surrounded by towering draconic warriors who speak in riddles about the catalyst and refuse to let him leave. But when an ancient enemy emerges from the void, threatening to consume entire star systems, Marcus realizes that his accidental arrival might not be coincidence at all. Sometimes the universe has plans that even dragons can't foresee, and sometimes a simple human with a wrench and stubborn determination is exactly what's needed to tip the scales of an interstellar war. Welcome aboard the Crimson Talon. Departure is negotiable. Marcus Chen had exactly 3 minutes to catch the transport to Kepler Station, and the docking bay was a maze of identical airlocks. He sprinted through the bustling spaceport, his toolbag bouncing against his hip, dodging cargo drones and cursing his luck. The job offer on Kepler was too good to pass up. Chief mechanic for a mining operation, with a salary that would finally get him off this backwater station. Bay 94, Bay 94, he muttered, squinting at the faded numbers above each airlock. The departure announcements echoed through the corridor in 6 different languages, none of which helped his growing panic. His ticket said Bay 94, transport Steady Eddie, destination Kepler Station. There. Bay 94. The airlock was already cycling closed, its warning lights flashing amber. Marcus didn't hesitate. He dove through the narrowing gap just as the heavy doors sealed behind him with a pneumatic hiss. Made it, he gasped, straightening his jacket and looking around for other passengers. The airlock was larger than he expected, with dark metal walls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols were etched into the bulkheads, flowing lines that hurt his eyes to follow. Hello? Anyone else boarding? Silence answered him. The inner airlock door opened with a whisper of pressurizing air, revealing a corridor that definitely didn't belong on a civilian transport. The walls were obsidian black, lined with what looked like scales. Red light strips provided minimal illumination, casting everything in an ominous crimson glow. The air tasted of ozone and something else, something wild and predatory. Marcus checked his ticket again. Bay 94, transport Steady Eddie. This had to be the right ship, even if it looked more like a warship than a passenger vessel. Maybe the mining company had upgraded their security. Pirates were always a problem in the Outer Rim. He shouldered his toolbag and warped deeper into the ship. The corridor stretched ahead, branching into passages that seemed to lead into darkness. His footsteps echoed strangely, as if the ship were much larger than it appeared. Emergency lighting flickered occasionally, revealing glimpses of massive blast doors and weapon mount points. Definitely not a civilian transport, Marcus muttered. A low rumble vibrated through the deck plates, the ship's engines coming online. They were already departing. Marcus quickened his pace, looking for passenger seating or at least a crew member to explain where he should go. The rumble grew stronger, accompanied by a sound he'd never heard before. Something between a purr and a growl that seemed to come from the ship itself. He turned a corner and stopped dead. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, with a vaulted ceiling that disappeared into shadows. Workstations lined the walls, but they were built for beings much larger than humans. Everything was oversized. Chairs that could seat someone 8 feet tall, control panels positioned well above his reach, and in the center of it all, a throne-like command chair that dominated the space. This is definitely not the Steady Eddie, Marcus said aloud. No, a voice agreed behind him, rich and melodious with an accent he couldn't place. It is not. Marcus spun around and immediately wished he hadn't. The woman standing in the corridor entrance was the most beautiful and terrifying person he'd ever seen. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, with skin that held a subtle metallic sheen like polished bronze. Her hair fell in dark waves past her shoulders, and when she moved, Marcus caught glimpses of something that might have been scales along her neck and arms. But it was her eyes that held him frozen. Golden amber, with vertical pupils that seemed to see straight through him. She wore form-fitting armor that looked like it had been crafted from black metal and dragonhide. A sword hung at her side, its handle wrapped in what appeared to be actual dragon scales. Everything about her radiated power and barely contained violence. "You are on the Crimson Talon," she said, taking a step closer. Her voice carried harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce. "I am Commander Zaratel of the 3rd Draconic Fleet, and you, little human, are very far from where you intended to be." Marcus's mouth had gone completely dry. "There's been a mistake." I was trying to catch a transport to Kepler Station. Bay 94. I must have gotten on the wrong ship. Commander Zarathel tilted her head, studying him with those predatory eyes. Bay 94 was indeed your destination. But the ship you seek departed 3 hours ago. We took its berth when it left. 3 hours ago? Marcus checked his chronometer and felt his stomach drop. He'd been reading station time wrong. Kepler time was 3 hours ahead. But the airlock was just closing when you forced your way aboard a draconic warship, Zarathel finished. Yes, we observed your rather dramatic entrance. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. He was on an alien warship surrounded by beings that could probably tear him apart without breaking a sweat, and they were already in space. His toolbag suddenly felt very inadequate. Look, this is just a misunderstanding, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. If you could just drop me off at the nearest station, I'll be out of your way. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Zaratel's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or something more dangerous. I am afraid that will not be possible. Why not? Because you have seen the interior of a draconic warship, because you now know of our presence in this system, and because, she paused, nostrils flaring slightly as she tested the air, because you smell of machine oil and determination and something else. Something we have been waiting for. Before Marcus could ask what that meant, footsteps echoed from the other corridors. Heavy, measured footsteps that suggested more large, dangerous beings were approaching. A lot more. My crew wishes to meet our unexpected passenger, Zarathel said. They have been asking many questions since we detected your presence. The first to emerge from the shadows was nearly as tall as Zarathel, but built like a living tank. Her armor was more practical than the commander's, scarred from obvious combat, and her auburn hair was braided with what looked like small bones. She moved with the fluid grace of a predator, and when she smiled, Marcus caught a glimpse of distinctly pointed teeth. This is Kesseran, our weapons specialist, Zarathel said. She is curious about your intentions. Kesseran circled Marcus slowly, her golden eyes taking in every detail. He's smaller than I expected, she said in a voice like gravel mixed with honey. Are all human males so compact? I'm 5'10", Marcus protested. That's perfectly average. Kesseran laughed, a sound that sent shivers down his spine. Average for humans, perhaps. But we are not human. Two more figures emerged from different passages. The first was slightly smaller than the others, with silver hair and skin that held a blue tint in the red lighting. She wore robes instead of armor, and symbols floated in the air around her. Actual symbols, glowing softly and rotating in complex patterns. A mage or scientist of some kind. Lysatel, our navigator and voidwalker, Zaratel introduced. She charts our course through both space and the spaces between. The second newcomer made Marcus take an involuntary step backward. She was broader than the others, with muscle definition that suggested she could bench press a shuttle. Her black hair was cut short, and scars marked her arms and face. Not decorative scars, but the kind earned in serious combat. She wore simple work clothes that were stained with grease and burn marks. And Veragoth, our chief engineer, Zaratel continued. She maintains the heart of our ship. Veragoth studied Marcus with professional interest. He carries tools, she observed. Good tools, well maintained. His hands know honest work. I'm a mechanic, Marcus said, feeling like he was in the middle of some kind of evaluation. I work on ships, stations, industrial equipment. Pretty much anything that needs fixing. The four dragon women exchanged glances that seemed to communicate volumes. Marcus had the distinct impression he was missing something important. How long has it been? Lysatel asked softly. 327 years, Zaratel replied. Since the oracle spoke of the catalyst. What's a catalyst? Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect he wouldn't like the answer. A being who arrives by chance but serves by choice, Veragoth said, her voice surprisingly gentle. One who can see what we cannot, touch what we cannot reach, and mend what we have broken. The oracle spoke of a small one, a mender of things, who would come to us when the shadow stirred again. Lysatel added, one who smells of iron and oil and carries the spark of creation in his soul. Marcus looked around at their faces, seeing something between hope and desperation in their expressions.
You think I'm this catalyst? We think, Zarathel said carefully, that coincidences are rare in the void.
and that your arrival here, at this time, in this manner, suggests the hand of fate. But I just got on the wrong ship. Did you? Kesseran asked. Or did the ship choose you? Before Marcus could respond to that disturbing question, alarms began wailing throughout the ship. Red lights flashed brighter, and the deck plating vibrated with a different rhythm. Not the steady pulse of normal engines, but something urgent and aggressive. Battle stations, Zarathel commanded, her voice carrying absolute authority. What do our sensors show? Lisatel raised her hands, and the floating symbols around her rearranged themselves into a three-dimensional display. Marcus watched in fascination as star maps and tactical readouts appeared in mid-air, showing their ship as a bright dot surrounded by empty space. Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, she reported. Single vessel, unknown configuration. It's wrong, Commander. The void around it tastes of endings. Vera Goth was already moving toward a console, her thick fingers dancing over controls that looked like they could start or stop stars. Engines at full combat readiness, all weapon systems charging. Visual display, Zarathel ordered. The air shimmered, and suddenly Marcus was looking at space itself, not on a screen, but as if the ship's hull had become transparent. Stars wheeled slowly around them, and directly ahead something dark moved against the starfield. At first, Marcus thought it was just a shadow, a place where the stars had gone out. Then he began to make out details, and his blood ran cold. The ship was organic, or had been once. It looked like someone had taken a massive creature, hollowed it out, and filled the empty spaces with technology that hurt to look at. Writhing tendrils extended from its hull, and where they moved, space itself seemed to darken. Void Eater, Kesseran breathed. I thought they were all destroyed in the last war. As did we all, Zarathel said grimly. It seems we were mistaken. What's a Void Eater? Marcus asked, though he was beginning to understand that knowing the answer might be worse than ignorance. Ships of the Shadow Fleet, Lysatel explained without taking her eyes off the tactical display. They consume energy, any energy. Light, heat, life force, the quantum foam itself. They leave nothing but cold emptiness in their wake. And they're supposed to be extinct? We made them extinct, Viragoth said grimly. 300 years ago, the combined fleets of 7 species hunted down every last Void Eater and destroyed them. Or so we believed. The enemy ship was growing larger in the display, and Marcus could see that the space around it was indeed darker, not just black, but actively consuming the light of nearby stars. Where its tendrils touched the cosmic background radiation, energy simply vanished. It's charging weapons, Kesseran reported. Whatever it's planning to do, we don't want to be here when it does it. Can we outrun it? Marcus asked. In open space, yes, Zarathel said, but we're too close to the shipping lanes. If it gets into populated space, she didn't need to finish. Marcus could imagine what would happen if that thing reached a space station or a populated planet. It would be like a black hole with malicious intent. So we fight, he said. 4 pairs of golden eyes turned to stare at him. We fight, Zarathel agreed. But understand, Marcus Chen of Earth. This may be the last battle any of us see. Void Eaters are not easily killed, and we are one ship against an enemy that has had 3 centuries to grow stronger. Then why aren't you running? Because, Kesseran said with a fierce smile, we are dragons. We do not flee from the dark. The ship shuddered as Veragoth brought the engines to full combat power. Weapon systems hummed to life with sounds that suggested barely contained destruction. Marcus felt the gravity shift as they changed course, angling to intercept the Void Eater before it could reach the shipping lanes. What can I do? He asked. You can stay here and stay safe, Zarathel said firmly. This is not your fight. Like hell it isn't. Marcus surprised himself with the vehemence in his voice. That thing is heading toward innocent people. Ships full of families, stations full of civilians. You said I was some kind of catalyst. Maybe this is why I'm here. You have no training in combat, Lysatel pointed out. No, but I know ships. I know how things work and how they break, and how to fix them when they do break. Marcus looked around at the 4 dragon women who had somehow become his companions. You need me alive to be useful, right? Then keep me alive while I figure out how to help. Zarathel studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. But you stay with Viragoth in engineering. If we fail here, you may be the only one left to tell others what we found. The ship lurched as they entered the Void Eater's effective range. On the display, tendrils of absolute darkness reached toward them like grasping fingers. Where they touched the Crimson Talon shields, energy readings dropped and warning lights began flashing. "It's trying to drain our power," Viragoth reported. "Shields holding for now, but I don't know how long." "Fire everything," Zarathel commanded. The ship shook as weapons discharged. Plasma cannons, particle beams, and something that made reality hiccup for a moment. The attack struck the Void Eater's hull and simply vanished, absorbed into its hungry flesh. "No effect," Kessaran said. "It's eating our attacks." "Then we get creative," Viragoth said. She looked at Marcus. "You said you fixed things. How do you kill something that eats energy?" Marcus's mind raced. How do you fight something that consumed the very forces you used against it? It was like trying to drown a fish or burn fire. "Unless feedback," he said suddenly. "If it's absorbing energy, what happens if you give it more than it can handle, or the wrong kind of energy?" "Explain," Zarathel said, not taking her eyes off the tactical display. "Like overloading a circuit, or feeding a computer program designed to process numbers into a system that handles graphics. It tries to process what you're giving it, but the input is all wrong, so it crashes." Viragoth's eyes lit up with understanding. "Incompatible energy signatures. If we could modulate our weapons to produce something it can't digest, do it," Zarathel ordered. "Whatever it takes." The next few minutes blurred together in a chaos of technical jargon and desperate improvisation. Marcus found himself working alongside Viragoth, his human-sized hands able to reach components that were too small for her thick fingers. They rerouted power conduits, reprogrammed targeting systems, and jury-rigged modifications that should have been impossible. "Try now," Viragoth called. The ship fired again, but this time the weapons discharged energy that flickered and changed, cycling through frequencies that made Marcus's teeth ache. The beam struck the Void Eater and the enemy ship convulsed. Its tendrils writhed like things in pain, and for the first time, sections of its hull began to glow instead of absorbing light. "It's working!" Kessaran shouted. "The thing can't process the signal." But their victory was short-lived. The Void Eater suddenly changed tactics, abandoning its energy drain and launching physical projectiles, chunks of twisted metal and bone, that moved too fast for the point defenses to intercept. One projectile struck their starboard hull. Alarm screamed, and emergency force fields activated to contain the breach. But through the gap, Marcus could see stars going out one by one as the Void Eater's influence spread. "Hull breach on deck 4, Lysatel reported, and something's in the ship. The Void signature is moving through our corridors." "Shadow spawn," Zaratel said grimly. "The Void Eater has seeded us with its offspring. They'll consume the ship from the inside." On the internal sensors, Marcus could see dark shapes moving through the corridors, shapes that bent light around them and left trails of absolute cold in their wake. They were heading for engineering. "How do we stop them?" he asked. "We can't," Viragoth said simply. "Shadow spawn exist partially outside our reality. Our weapons can barely touch them." Marcus stared at the approaching darkness and felt something shift inside him. These creatures were coming to devour innocent people, and he was supposed to just hide and hope someone else could stop them? No, whatever he was, mechanic, catalyst, or just a stubborn human who refused to quit. He wasn't going to let that happen. "Then we don't fight them," he said. "We outthink them." The first shadow spawn rounded the corner into engineering, and Marcus Chen, late of Earth and accidentally of the Crimson Talon, stepped forward to meet his destiny with a wrench in his hand and a plan forming in his mind. The shadow spawn moved like liquid darkness given form, flowing around the engineering bay's entrance with movements that hurt Marcus's eyes to follow. Where it touched the bulkheads, frost formed and the metal grew brittle. The air temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds and his breath began to mist. Viragoth raised a plasma torch, its blue flame providing the only real light in the suddenly darkened space. "Stay behind me, human. These things feed on warmth and life force." But Marcus was studying the creature's movement patterns, the way it flowed around solid objects while leaving trails of absolute cold. "It's not fully here," he said suddenly. "Look at how it moves. It's phasing between dimensions." "That is what makes them so dangerous," Viragoth replied, keeping the torch between them and the spawn. "They exist partially in the void between spaces. Our weapons pass through them."
But they still follow physical laws, Marcus said, backing toward the engineering console.
"They're avoiding the plasma flame, which means they can be affected by high-energy emissions." And if they're phasing between dimensions, the spawn suddenly rushed forward, its form expanding like smoke. Viragoth swept the plasma torch in a wide arc, and the creature recoiled, but Marcus could see it was learning, finding gaps in her defense. Vera, I need you to overload the gravity generators, all of them. Maximum output, unstable harmonics. That will tear the ship apart. No, it'll create dimensional stress fractures. If these things exist partially outside our space, then disrupting the dimensional boundaries should. The spawn found its opening and flowed around Viragoth's guard. Marcus felt its touch like ice water in his veins, draining his strength and making his vision blur. But instead of retreating, he lunged forward and grabbed a handful of power cables. Do it now! Viragoth's fingers flew over the controls. The gravity generators throughout the ship began cycling rapidly between full power and zero output, creating standing waves of distorted space-time. The effect was immediate. The spawn suddenly became solid, its form snapping into full reality with a sound like breaking glass. Marcus didn't hesitate. He swung his wrench with every ounce of strength he had left, connecting with the now solid creature. It shrieked, a sound that seemed to come from somewhere very far away, and dissolved into particles that sparkled briefly before vanishing. Remarkable, Viragoth breathed. You forced it into phase lock with our dimensional frequency. Will that work on the others? If we can maintain the gravitational distortions, yes, but the ship won't survive it for long. Through the internal communication system, they could hear the sounds of battle throughout the Crimson Talon. Kesseran's voice came through the speakers, strained with effort. Multiple contacts on Deck 3. Commander, these things are everywhere. Implementing Gravity Pulse Protocol, Zara Thel's voice responded. All hands, brace for dimensional instability.
The ship groaned around them as the gravity generators went into full chaotic output.
Marcus felt his inner ear rebel against the constantly shifting forces, but through the sensor feeds, he could see shadow spawn throughout the ship suddenly becoming vulnerable to the Dragon crew's weapons. It's working, Lysatel reported. But Commander, the dimensional stress is affecting our shields. The Void Eater is preparing for another attack. On the main display, the enemy ship had pulled back to a safe distance and was gathering energy for what looked like a final assault. Dark matter streams flowed around its hull, and the space around it began to warp visibly. It's charging some kind of reality weapon, Marcus said, watching the readings spike beyond anything he'd ever seen. If that thing fires, it will unmake everything in a sphere 10,000 kilometers across. Viragoth finished grimly, including the shipping lanes, the mining stations, and 3 billion people in the Kepler system. Marcus stared at the readings, his mind racing through possibilities. They'd won the battle aboard the ship, but they were about to lose the war in the most catastrophic way possible. Unless, Vera, what's our current power output? 90% of maximum. We're running hot, but we can maintain this level. And what would happen if we directed all that power, engines, life support, weapons, everything, into a single focused beam? We would die, she said bluntly. No power means no life support, no gravity, no shields. But the beam itself would be incredibly potent. Potent enough to disrupt whatever that thing is charging? Viragoth studied the sensor readings, her expression grim. Possibly. But even if it worked, we'd be dead before we could see the results. Not necessarily. Marcus was already moving toward the engine core access panels. What if we didn't drain our power reserves? What if we overloaded them? You want to destabilize our reactor core? I want to turn our entire ship into a directed energy weapon. The reactor goes critical, but instead of exploding outward, we channel the energy through the weapon arrays. It'll be like firing our entire power plant at that thing. Viragoth was quiet for a moment, running calculations in her head. The energy release would be enormous, but the ship would survive only if we could channel 99% of the explosion into the beam. Miss by even 1%, and we all become vapor. Can you do it? Not alone. The targeting systems would need constant adjustment. The power flow would have to be balanced in real time, and someone would need to manually stabilize the reactor core during the overload sequence. She looked at him with something like respect. I would need assistance. Then you've got it. Viragoth smiled, the first genuinely warm expression he'd seen from any of the Dragon crew. Very well, little Catalyst. Let us see if you truly are what the Oracle foretold. They worked with desperate efficiency, rerouting power systems and preparing the ship for what was essentially a controlled suicide. Marcus found himself crawling through maintenance shafts barely wide enough for a human. connecting bypass circuits that would route the reactor's entire output through weapon systems never designed to handle such energies. "Commander," Viragoth called over the comm, "we're implementing Emergency Protocol Omega. All crew to emergency stations. We're going to detonate our reactor core in a directed explosion." "Acknowledged," Zarathel's voice came back immediately. "How long do you need?" 3 minutes to complete preparations. The reactor overload sequence will take another 2 minutes once initiated. We don't have 5 minutes. The Void Eater will fire in approximately 4 minutes. 4. Marcus looked at the half-completed modifications and made a decision that surprised him. "Then we do it live. Start the overload sequence now, and I'll finish the modifications while the reactor destabilizes." "That's insane," Viragoth said. "The radiation levels alone will kill you. Maybe. But if we wait, everyone dies." He grabbed a radiation suit from the emergency locker. "Besides, I'm good with my hands. How hard can it be?" As it turned out, working on live power systems while a nuclear reactor slowly went critical was exactly as terrifying as it sounded. The radiation suit's alarm began chirping within minutes, and the heat inside the reactor access tunnel quickly became unbearable. But Marcus pressed on, his hands steady as he connected circuit after circuit. Through the suit's comm system, he could hear the battle raging around them. The Crimson Talon was fighting off secondary attacks from the Void Eater, smaller energy drains and projectile attacks designed to disrupt their preparations. 30 seconds to critical mass, Viragoth announced. "Marcus, you need to get out of there." "Almost done." He was connecting the final power coupling, a modification that would direct the reactor's death scream into their forward weapons array. His hands shook from radiation exposure, but the connection held. "There. All yours, Vera." He crawled out of the access tunnel just as the reactor reached the point of no return. Emergency lighting bathed everything in hellish red, and the deck plates vibrated with barely contained energy. Through the ship's hull, he could feel the Void Eater's reality weapon reaching its own critical point. "All power to forward weapons," Viragoth commanded, targeting the enemy ship's central mass. "Target acquired." Kesseran reported from weapons control. "All batteries aligned." "Fire," Zarathel ordered. The Crimson Talon unleashed the fury of a dying star. Every ounce of energy the ship possessed, plus the complete annihilation of its reactor core, channeled into a beam of pure destruction that lit up half the system. The beam struck the Void Eater just as it fired its own reality weapon. The collision of energies created something that Marcus's human brain couldn't properly process. Space twisted, time hiccuped, and for a moment he could see through the fabric of reality into the void between dimensions. In that space, things moved that had no names and wanted nothing more than to devour everything that was. Then the explosion reached them. Even with 90% of the energy directed away from the ship, the remaining 1% was enough to throw them across the system like a toy. Emergency force fields held, barely, and the crew found themselves alive but drifting in space with no power and very little air. "Damage report," Zarathel called weakly. "Reactor core completely destroyed." Viragoth reported. "Life support running on emergency batteries. We have perhaps 6 hours of air remaining." "And the Void Eater?" Lysatel consulted her portable sensors, most of the ship's systems having been fried in the energy discharge. "Gone. Completely destroyed. But Commander, the explosion has created a dimensional rift. Something is coming through." On the emergency display, Marcus could see the tear in space where the two weapons had collided. It pulsed with unnatural light, and through it, shapes were moving. But these weren't the hungry darkness of the Void Eaters. These ships gleamed like silver and moved with purpose rather than malice. "The Oracle Fleet," Zarathel breathed. "They've come." The first ship through the rift was beautiful in a way that made Marcus's eyes water. It seemed to be built from crystallized starlight, all flowing curves and impossible geometries. It moved toward them with graceful purpose, and as it approached, he could feel something in the back of his mind. A presence, ancient and patient and wise. "Well done, Catalyst," a voice said directly into his thoughts. "You have exceeded even our expectations." "Who are you?" he asked aloud. "We are those who watch and wait and occasionally intervene when the universe requires it. Your arrival on this ship was no accident, Marcus Chen of Earth. We guided your steps to this moment." "Why?" "Because the Void Eaters were not extinct, as the younger races believed. They retreated to the spaces between galaxies, growing stronger and more cunning. Soon they would have returned in numbers too great to resist. But you have shown us something important, that the barrier between dimensions can be weaponized. that the hunger of the void can be turned against itself. The Oracle ship extended a docking tube toward the Crimson Talon. Around them, more ships were emerging from the rift, a fleet of vessels unlike anything in Marcus's experience. We offer you a choice, Catalyst. Return to your original path. We will ensure you reach Kepler Station safely, with enough compensation to live comfortably for the rest of your days. Or... Marcus asked, though he thought he already knew. Or join this crew permanently. Help them prepare for the greater war that is coming. The Void Eaters you face today were merely scouts. The true Shadow Fleet lies in the deep void between galaxies, and they will return. When they do, the universe will need catalysts. Beings who can think beyond the normal patterns, who can find solutions where others see only problems. Marcus looked around at the 4 dragon women who had become his unlikely companions. Zarathul watched him with golden eyes that held centuries of experience and a strange hope. Kesseran grinned at him, clearly hoping he would choose to stay. Lysatel nodded as if she had already seen his decision in the patterns of fate. And Viragath, what happens to them if I leave? He asked. They continue their mission. They fight the darkness wherever they find it, but they do so alone, as they have for centuries. And if I stay, then you help us prepare an entire galaxy for war. You teach others to think as you think, to see solutions where others see only defeat. You become part of something larger than yourself. Marcus thought about his life before this moment. A series of temporary jobs, moving from station to station, never quite fitting in anywhere. He'd been running from something without even knowing what. But here, on this ship with these extraordinary beings, he'd found something he'd never had before. A place where his particular skills mattered, where being stubbornly human was exactly what was needed. I stay, he said without hesitation. But I have conditions. Name them. First, I want regular communication with Earth. My parents deserve to know I'm alive, even if I can't tell them where I am. Second, when this war comes, we do everything possible to minimize civilian casualties. I won't be part of something that sacrifices innocence for strategy. And third, he looked directly at Zarathel. I want to know everything. No more mysteries, no more you'll understand when you're ready. If I'm going to help fight this war, I need to know exactly what we're up against. Zarathel smiled, the first time he'd seen her do so. Agreed, Marcus Chen. Welcome to the Crimson Guard. The Oracle ship's docking tube made contact with their hull, and breathable air began flowing into their damaged vessel. Through the connection, beings moved. Not human, not draconic, but something older and stranger. They brought with them technology that could restore the Crimson Talon and knowledge that would help prepare for the coming storm. But as Marcus watched the repair crews work, he noticed something that made him smile. For all their advanced technology and cosmic wisdom, the Oracle beings were struggling with some of the more basic mechanical systems. They understood the theory perfectly, but they lacked the practical experience to actually make things work. Need a hand? He called out to one of them, hefting his trusty wrench. The being turned toward him with what might have been relief. Your assistance would be appreciated, Catalyst. Marcus rolled up his sleeves and got to work. Around him, his new crewmates, his family, he realized, watched with amusement as a simple human mechanic taught cosmic entities how to properly calibrate a power coupling. Some things, he thought, never changed. No matter how advanced the technology, no matter how exotic the location, there was always something that needed fixing. And Marcus Chen, late of Earth, and now of the Crimson Talon, was very good at fixing things. The real war was coming, but for now they had time to prepare, time to build alliances, to share knowledge, and to ready the galaxy for a threat unlike anything it had faced before. The Shadow Fleet might have patience measured in eons, but they had something the darkness lacked, the stubborn determination of those who refused to surrender, no matter the odds. Marcus tightened a coupling that had been installed backwards by beings with intelligence spanning galaxies, and smiled. This was going to be interesting. 6 months after the Void Eater encounter, Marcus Chen stood in the command center of Forge Station Alpha, watching as construction crews put the finishing touches on humanity's first interstellar defense platform. The station was a marvel of cooperation between a dozen different species, combining the best technology each had to offer into something greater than the sum of its parts. The Crimson Talon floated nearby, fully repaired and upgraded with Oracle technology that made it deadlier than ever. But it was no longer alone. A fleet of similar ships surrounded the station. Draconic warships, human destroyers, Kethran light cruisers, and vessels from races Marcus was still learning to pronounce. All of them bore the same symbol, a stylized talon gripping a star, the mark of the Crimson Guard. The defense grid is online, reported Captain Sarah Martinez, formerly of the Earth Defense Force and now Marcus's liaison with the human military. All weapon platforms are responding to Central Command. Good, Marcus said, studying the tactical display. The Kepler system had become the prototype for the galaxy's new defense strategy. Multiple layers of automated defenses, each one designed to exploit the weaknesses they'd discovered in Void Eater technology. What about the dimensional anchor arrays? Fully operational, if any Shadow Fleet ships try to open rifts in this system, we'll know about it instantly. Marcus nodded, but his attention was focused on the long-range sensors. For weeks now, they'd been detecting strange disturbances in the cosmic background radiation, subtle patterns that suggested massive fleets moving in the void between galaxies. The Oracle had confirmed their worst fears. The Shadow Fleet was mobilizing for a full-scale invasion. Marcus, Zarathel's voice came through his personal comm. Please report to Briefing Room 7. We have received new intelligence. He found the command staff gathered around a holographic display showing the galactic rim. Red markers indicated confirmed Shadow Fleet positions, while blue markers showed their own defensive preparations.
There was far too much red and not nearly enough blue.
The situation has deteriorated, announced Oracle Prime, the crystalline being who served as liaison between the ancient race and the younger species. Our deep void sensors have detected the formation of a shadow armada comprising no fewer than 10,000 vessels. 10,000? Captain Martinez paled. Our entire combined fleet is barely 300 ships. The numbers are indeed daunting, Zarathel agreed. But we have advantages they do not. We understand their technology now, thanks to Marcus's insights. We have weapons specifically designed to exploit their weaknesses. And we have something else, added Lysatel, manipulating the display to show new markers scattered throughout the galaxy. The Catalyst Network. Over the past 6 months, Marcus had been traveling to worlds across the galaxy, teaching other engineers and scientists to think like him, to see problems from human perspectives, to find creative solutions that more advanced minds might overlook. The results had been remarkable. Tell them about the Titan project, Kesserin said with a predatory smile. Marcus activated another section of the display showing a massive shipyard hidden deep in the Andromeda Nebula. We've been building something special. Not just ships, but a mobile fortress specifically designed to counter Shadow Fleet tactics. The hologram showed a vessel that dwarfed even the largest dreadnoughts. It was built around a stable artificial singularity, with weapon systems that could reshape local space-time and defensive fields that existed partially outside normal dimensions. The Liberator, Marcus continued. It's more than just a warship. It's a mobile base of operations that can deploy anywhere in the galaxy instantly. But more importantly, it's powered by something the Shadow Fleet can't drain or corrupt. How is that possible? Captain Martinez asked. Because it runs on hope, Biragoth said simply. The Oracle showed us how to harness the quantum resonance of conscious thought, specifically, the determination to protect what we love. Every being who volunteers to serve on the Liberator literally powers it with their will to fight. Oracle Prime's crystalline form shifted to what Marcus had learned indicated approval. The concept was revolutionary when the human first proposed it. The Shadow Fleet feeds on despair, on the entropy and endings that mark the death of civilizations. But hope is antithetical to their very existence. There's more, Marcus said, bringing up another display. This one showed the galaxy itself, but with strange new connections between star systems, threads of light that pulsed with energy. The Beacon Network. Every world we've contacted, every species that's joined the Crimson Guard, has agreed to install quantum beacons on their homeworlds. When activated, they create an interconnected web of consciousness that spans the entire galaxy. If the Shadow Fleet thinks they can pick us off one system at a time, they're in for a surprise. The briefing was interrupted by alarms. The long-range sensors had detected something approaching the galactic rim, something massive and dark that left a trail of dead space in its wake. They're coming, Lysatel announced. The Shadow Fleet has begun its advance. First contact estimated in 72 hours. The room fell silent. After months of preparation, the moment they'd all been dreading had arrived. Marcus looked around at the faces of his companions, his family, and saw fear mixed with determination. They were ready for this fight, even if the odds were impossible. Oracle Prime, he said, is the Liberator ready for deployment? All systems are operational. The consciousness matrix is fully charged with the will of 40,000 volunteers from across the galaxy. Then let's go save the universe. The next 3 days blurred together in a chaos of final preparations. Ships launched from 100 worlds, converging on rally points throughout the galaxy. The beacon network came online, connecting billions of minds in a web of shared purpose. And deep in the Andromeda Nebula, the Liberator prepared for its maiden voyage. Marcus stood on the bridge of the massive vessel, marveling at the way it felt alive around him. Every surface hummed with barely contained energy, and he could sense the presence of every volunteer who had contributed their will to power. Human determination, draconic pride, Kethran wisdom, and the fierce joy of a dozen other species, all united in a single purpose. Contacts on long-range sensors, announced the tactical officer, a Kethran whose scales had turned deep blue with concentration. Shadowfleet is entering the galaxy at 17 different points. They're spreading out to avoid concentrated resistance. Exactly what we expected, Zarathel said from the command chair. The Liberator's bridge was designed to accommodate multiple species, and she looked perfectly comfortable in the oversized captain's position. Lisa Tell, activate the beacon network. Let every world in the galaxy know the fight has begun. The network came alive with a pulse of pure light that Marcus could feel in his bones. Across the galaxy, billions of beings received the same message. The darkness has returned, but we stand together. Do not fear, for hope burns bright. The response was immediate. Every world, every station, every ship that had joined their alliance lit up with acknowledgement signals. They were not alone in this fight. First engagement at Rigel's system, the communications officer reported. Admiral Jang reports successful deployment of dimensional snare tactics. 3 Void Eaters destroyed, minimal friendly casualties. Good, Marcus said, studying the tactical display. What about the Centauri sector? Heavy fighting, but holding. The automated defense platforms are performing better than projected. For the next 6 hours, they received reports from across the galaxy as the Shadow Fleet encountered their layered defenses for the first time. The enemy had expected to face the same scattered resistance they'd encountered centuries ago, but instead found a unified, prepared galaxy that had learned from past mistakes. But Marcus knew this initial success wouldn't last. The Shadow Fleet was testing their defenses, probing for weaknesses. The real assault would come soon. Mass formation detected, the sensor operator announced. Bearing galactic north, approximately 5,000 vessels concentrating for assault on the Terran sector.
Marcus felt his blood run cold.
Earth. The Shadow Fleet had identified humanity's homeworld as a primary target, probably because they'd recognized the influence of human thinking in the galaxy's defensive strategies. If they could eliminate the source of the capitalist concepts, they could begin unraveling the entire network. Set course for Earth, maximum velocity. Zarathel ordered. All hands to battle stations. The Liberator folded space around itself and arrived in the Sol system just as the first wave of Shadow Fleet vessels emerged from the void. Marcus had never seen so many Void Eaters in one place. They filled space like a swarm of mechanical locusts, their hunger radiating outward in waves that made reality itself feel thin and fragile. Earth Defense Forces engaging. Captain Martinez reported from the communications station. But they're outnumbered 50-1. On the display, Marcus could see the desperate battle raging around his homeworld. Human ships, augmented with the best technology the Alliance could provide, fought with the stubborn determination he'd come to appreciate during his time among the stars. But they were being systematically overwhelmed. Deploy all fighters, he ordered. Launch boarding pods at the largest Void Eaters. And charge the reality cannon. The Liberator's main weapon was Marcus's greatest contribution to the ship's design, a device that could literally rewrite the laws of physics in a localized area. If the Shadow Fleet wanted to exist partially outside reality, he was happy to force them back into it. Reality cannon charged and ready. Vera Goth reported from the engineering station. Target acquired on the flagship. Fire. The beam that lanced out from the Liberator was invisible to normal sensors, but its effects were immediately apparent. The massive Shadow Fleet flagship suddenly became fully corporeal, its ability to phase between dimensions stripped away. For the first time in eons, a Void Eater was completely vulnerable to conventional weapons. All ships concentrate fire on the flagship, Zarathel commanded. The Allied fleet responded instantly. Plasma cannons, particle beams, and exotic weapons from a dozen different species converged on the now solid enemy vessel. It tried to flee to return to the safety of dimensional phase, but the reality cannon's effects were persistent. Under the combined assault, the flagship's hull began to crack, then buckle, then finally explode in a brilliant flash of annihilated matter. The destruction of their flagship sent shockwaves through the Shadow Fleet. For creatures that had spent millennia believing themselves invincible, the sight of their most powerful vessel being destroyed was profoundly disturbing. But Marcus wasn't done. Kesseran deployed the Hope bombs. The weapon pods launched from the Liberator looked innocuous enough. Small crystalline devices that drifted seemingly at random through the Shadow Fleet formation. But when they activated, they began broadcasting something the Void Eaters had never encountered before. The concentrated will and determination of every being in the galaxy who refused to surrender. The effect on the Shadow Fleet was catastrophic. Their ships, designed to feed on entropy and despair, suddenly found themselves exposed to raw hope and defiance. Systems began failing, hulls cracked from incompatible energy, and several of the smaller vessels simply dissolved as their existence became impossible. "They're retreating," the sensor operator announced, disbelief clear in his voice. "The Shadow Fleet is withdrawing from the system." But Marcus wasn't ready to celebrate yet. "Where are they going?" Lysatel consulted her navigation displays, her expression growing grave. "They're regrouping at the Galactic Rim. All fleets, all scattered formations, they're combining into a single massive armada." "How massive?"
Nearly 20,000 vessels?
"And Marcus." She looked at him with concern. "They're adapting. Our sensors show they're modifying their ships, incorporating countermeasures against our new weapons." Marcus nodded grimly. They'd won the first round, but the Shadow Fleet was learning from their defeats just as quickly as the Alliance learned from their victories. The next engagement would be the decisive one. How long until they're ready to attack again? 48 hours, perhaps less. Then we use the time we have. Oracle Prime, can you accelerate the production of reality cannons? I want every ship in the Alliance equipped with them. It will require the combined efforts of every manufacturing facility in the galaxy, the crystalline being replied. But yes, it is possible. For the next 2 days, the galaxy became a massive weapons factory. Every species contributed their best technology and their most skilled workers to the effort. Humans provided engineering expertise and creative problem-solving. Dragons contributed their mastery of energy manipulation. The Oracle shared their advanced manufacturing techniques. Even civilian populations got involved, with entire worlds working around the clock to produce components. Marcus found himself at the center of it all, coordinating efforts across 100 worlds while preparing for what would likely be the final battle. The weight of responsibility was enormous. If his strategies failed, entire civilizations would be consumed by the hungry darkness. But he wasn't alone. Zarathel stood beside him, her presence a constant reminder of the strength and courage that had brought them this far. Kesseran kept morale high with her fierce optimism and terrible jokes. Lysatel wove connections between distant fleets, coordinating timing across impossible distances. And Verigoth worked miracles of engineering, turning desperate improvisation into elegant solutions. When the Shadow Fleet finally emerged from the Galactic Rim for their final assault, they faced a galaxy that had transformed itself into a single, unified weapon. Every ship carried reality cannons. Every world was protected by dimensional anchor arrays. And connecting it all was the beacon network, carrying the combined will of trillions of sentient beings who had chosen to fight rather than submit. The battle that followed would be remembered for eons afterward. It raged across multiple star systems, with fleets of impossible size, maneuvering through space in patterns too complex for any single mind to comprehend. The Shadow Fleet fought with the desperate fury of entities that had never faced true opposition, while the Alliance fought with the determination of those defending everything they held dear. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Liberator, coordinating strategy across the entire galactic front when the moment came that changed everything. The Shadow Fleet, pressed by losses they had never imagined possible, made their final gambit. "They're opening a rift," Lysatel announced, her voice tight with alarm. "Not to our dimension, but to the source space. The void between universes where they originated." On the display, a wound in reality opened near the galactic core, and through it poured something that made the Void Eaters look like harmless insects. The beings that emerged defied description, entities of pure entropy and ending, creatures that existed to unmake the very concept of existence itself. "The hunger eternal," Oracle Prime said. Its crystalline form dimming with what Marcus had learned indicated profound fear. "We had not known they still existed. If they fully manifest in this universe, then we stop them from manifesting," Marcus said simply. "Zaratel, take us into that rift." "Marcus, that's suicide." Even if we survive the transition, we'll be in their home dimension. We can't fight them there. We don't need to fight them. We need to do what humans do best. Break something that everyone says can't be broken. He turned to address the entire bridge. The rift is a door between universes. Doors have hinges, supports, structural elements that keep them stable. We find those elements and we collapse the entire passage and trap ourselves in the void dimension, Biragoth pointed out. Maybe, or maybe we find a way back. Either way, it's better than watching these things devour our universe. The Liberator plunged into the rift, passing through layers of reality that human senses weren't designed to perceive. They emerged in a space that wasn't quite space, filled with creatures that weren't quite creatures, under laws of physics that didn't quite make sense. But Marcus had spent his life working with things that didn't make sense, and he'd learned that everything could be understood if you looked at it from the right angle. The void dimension had structure, patterns, weak points that could be exploited. There, he said, pointing to a nexus of energy streams that seemed to anchor the rift to both dimensions. That's the load-bearing connection. If we can destabilize it, the entire passage will collapse, Lisa Tell finished. But the energy release will destroy us. Not if we channel it properly. Vera, can you modify the reality cannon to work in reverse? Instead of forcing matter into normal space, make it reject this dimension entirely? That's... Vera Goth paused, her mind racing through calculations. Actually possible, but the power requirements would drain our entire consciousness matrix. Then, we give it everything we have. Every ounce of hope, determination, and stubborn human refusal to quit. Marcus opened a channel to the entire ship. All hands, this is Marcus. We're about to attempt something that's either brilliant or insane. I need every one of you to focus on why we're fighting, the people you love, the worlds you want to protect, the future you want to build. Give that feeling to the ship, and let's show these ancient horrors what it means to face a united galaxy. The response was immediate. Marcus could feel the consciousness matrix blazing with the combined will of 40,000 volunteers, all focused on a single purpose. The modified reality cannon drew on that power, building to levels that should have torn the ship apart. Firing, Biragoth announced. The beam struck the dimensional anchor, and reality screamed. The nexus point began to unravel, dimensional bonds snapping like overstressed cables. The rift started collapsing, pulling the manifesting Hunger Eternal back into their native void. But the backlash was enormous. The Liberator was caught in the dimensional collapse, torn between universes as the passage imploded. Marcus felt the ship being pulled apart at the quantum level, and for a moment he was certain they had failed. Then something impossible happened. The beacon network, that web of consciousness spanning the galaxy, reached across dimensional barriers to find them. Trillions of minds, all focused on bringing their champions home, created a bridge of pure will that spanned the gap between universes. The Liberator materialized back in normal space just as the rift sealed forever. They were battered, their systems failing but alive. And around them, the Shadow Fleet was dying. Cut off from their source dimension and exposed to the galaxy's unified defenses, the Void Eaters dissolved like shadows at dawn. Marcus slumped into his chair, exhaustion hitting him like a physical blow. They had won, but the cost had been enormous. Ships destroyed, lives lost, entire systems damaged by the final battle. Damage reports coming in from across the galaxy, Captain Martinez announced. But the Shadow Fleet is gone. All of them. We did it. No, Marcus said quietly. We all did it. Every being who chose to fight instead of surrender. Every world that refused to submit. Every person who held on to hope when things looked darkest. Zarathel moved to stand beside his chair. The Oracle's prophecy spoke of a catalyst who would arrive when the shadows stirred. But you were more than just a catalyst, Marcus. You were the spark that lit a fire across the galaxy. So what happens now? He asked. The war's over, the enemy is defeated. What does a catalyst do in peacetime? He helps build the peace, she said simply. There are worlds to rebuild, technologies to share, new alliances to forge. The galaxy has learned to work together. Now we need to learn to live together. Marcus looked out at the stars, thinking about the future they had fought to preserve. It wouldn't be easy. Peace never was. There would be disputes, misunderstandings, new challenges that would test their unity. But they had proven something important. When different species worked together, when they shared their strengths and covered each other's weaknesses, they could accomplish the impossible. All right, he said, standing and straightening his shoulders. Let's get started. The galaxy was vast, filled with wonders and dangers yet to be discovered. But for the first time in his life, Marcus Chen knew exactly where he belonged. He was home among the stars, part of a crew that had become his family, helping to build a future where hope would always triumph over darkness. Behind them, Earth shone like a blue jewel in the void. Ahead of them lay infinite possibilities. And around them, the greatest alliance in galactic history, prepared to write the next chapter of their story, together. The mechanic from Earth had fixed more than just broken machines. He had helped fix a broken galaxy, one connection at a time.